The stage is set, and the Spurs and the Heat are set to face off once again in the NBA Finals. Welcome to the Spurs Roundtable, powered by Project Spurs. I'm your host, Jeff Garcia, and to join me to talk about the Spurs in the NBA Finals once again is Project Spurs' Preine, Alicia Guerrero, Quixem Ramirez, we call him Q, and of course, Madalyn Mendoza. Well, guys, here we go. Once again, Spurs versus Heat. A little vengeance is probably on the plate this time. So, overall, heading into this series, what are we looking at? What really stands out in this series, Aaron?
Well, there's going to be too many people focused on the matchup of last season, and when there's actually quite a few differences between these two teams. The Heat are a little bit older. They lost Mike Miller in the offseason, and the Spurs their depth has improved. They have more ball handlers. Their offense overall efficiency has improved, and so has their defense.
Right. Well, you're talking about how the Heat have improved. No, the Spurs have improved themselves.
I mean, the Spurs have improved, but the Heat have kind of, I would say, their talent has decreased, or they just kind of stalled a little bit.
Regardless whether they improved or not, they still have a certain player that wears black and red. And of course, we're talking about LeBron James. What do you think?
I think in this series, Kawhi needs to step up, even keep his consistency, and show the fearlessness he had against Ibaka on LeBron.
Right.
So I think he's going to be our X factor in that situation. I think the Spurs have matured not only physically but mentally. I think they're hungrier this year and they're more serious, more focused, especially after the heartbreak of last year. Yeah. So I think they have a better chance this year.
But unlike last season in the NBA Finals, this time around, the road to the NBA Finals goes through San Antonio. How much is that a factor?
Factors a little bit. I mean, the format's changed too. It's 2-2, 1-1-1. Kind of changes the fact that we're going to be playing Game 6 in Miami and then Game 7 in San Antonio. Maybe that factors into it, but ultimately the Spurs are really good at home, really good on the road, and they've said themselves championship teams win on the road. So if they're going to get to that point, they're going to have to be able to prove something there. Well,
let's face it, the Spurs' road to the NBA Finals was a lot tougher than Miami's.
Right.
Spurs had to go through Dallas, a 7-game series, Oklahoma, 6-game series. How much is that going to weigh on the Spurs heading into Game 1?
I think that this year being able to play a little bit more games and not just having a sweep every single round is going to help them. They're more used to having to fight for it, and they're hungry. They want it this year. So I think.
But wouldn't you think that the road to the finals for the Spurs, they got beaten up a lot more so than Miami did? Miami they might have had an easier path.
Yeah, but we have time to rest. I mean, we finished last night. Game 1 isn't until Thursday, so I think the Spurs they're going to have time to rest, look at film, get ready, and they'll be ready for Game 1.
To her point, the rest is really just kind of cancel all of that out. And look at the offensive weapons that they've had to go up against. They just finished with Durant and Westbrook. They played LaMarcus Aldridge and Damian Lillard. Before that, Dirk Nowitzki. They're tested.
Right. Well, Miami had to play Charlotte. Wow. Brooklyn. So their path was a little easier. But, one thing that really comes out of this series heading into Game 1 is the Tony Parker injury. He did not play for pretty much most of Game 6 versus the Thunder. How concerned are you about that?
I'm concerned, but I'm hoping that the 4 days of rest will get him back in the game. And I think the Spurs proved last night that they're not afraid of adversity, and they all compensated for that and made up for it. So I think they'll.
Well, not only that, they have. I mean, you look at a young guy like Corey Joseph, Patty Mills off the bench. How much credit do you give a guy like Corey Joseph just to be thrown into the fire like that?
He brought that tenacity into the game, and he set the tone, and he showed that the bench can do it.
Are you worried about the Tony Parker injury?
I am a little bit. I mean, although this team, Popovich deserves a medal by plugging in, Corey Joseph and Matt Bonner and Aaron Baines and just putting them in roles where they can succeed. But ultimately, Tony Parker is their most successful, most reliable ball handler. I mean, Manu at times is one of the best, most creative finishers, passers in the NBA. But they're going to need Tony Parker to step up and be that, to penetrate off the dribble. Because other than that, you kind of get into murky territory with Corey and Patty. Guys that can do it, but guys that necessarily you don't want doing it in extended minutes against Miami.
Personally, you were talking about an X factor with that being Kawhi. My X factor is actually the Spurs bench. I think Miami doesn't really have an answer for the Spurs bench. You look at what they did in Game 6, they being the Spurs bench. 50-something points, 50-plus points.
Opposed to 5 from OKC.
Right. I mean, you're looking at that bench, and you may say, LeBron's going to get his, Wade is going to do his damage, Bosh, be pulling out the defense out of that three-point range. But when it's time and that bench comes in for San Antonio, Miami really doesn't have a counter.
No, Miami is going to do something similar to what OKC did. They're going to shorten up the rotations, mainly going to be the starters, and really what's important for Miami is going to be Chris Bosh. Now, he's not the defensive presence like Serge Ibaka is, but his mid-range capability is very threatening to the Spurs, just like Aldridge and Ibaka and Dirk Nowitzki. So they're going to have to kind of take that same approach. They're not going to be able to leave him alone on the pick and pop. They're going to have to pay a lot of attention to him on screens and rely on a lot of switching and one-on-one when it comes to defense on LeBron James and Wade.
Well, the way the Spurs ended last season on a sour note, this is a chance for redemption for this team. You know, you're on Twitter saying, what is it, the road to redemption?
Redemption round.
Redemption round.
Hashtag redemption round.
How big of a factor is that heading into this series, the fact that they came up short in Game 6 last season?
You know, there is no doubt about it. This finals round is going to be emotional for both Spurs team, Heat team, and both of the fans. It's going to be really emotional. They're going to be playing hard. They won it this year. Listening to the post-game press conferences last night after the
Tim
win.
Duncan even said himself, we will win this.
He said, you know, people forget how close they really were last year. So I think with the bench being more in depth and having more minutes, I think they're all wanting it really badly. So I think the emotional factor is going to be key for them.
Well, let's look at the other side of the court, that being Miami. We know LeBron is going to be LeBron, but is there other player other than LeBron that kind of puts a little worry in you?
I would say Chris Bosh, like Aaron said. I mean, he's the second most important player on the Heat. Dwayne Wade's kind of off and on. He's there, he's not. He's really important too, but Bosh is the really only reliable rim protector. And when he's on, he's knocking down mid-range shots. He kind of stretches the Spurs defense. He puts them in bad positions, and he's the guy that's going to be, you know, kind of the.
Well, what did you say? The Spurs can also do the same thing to Miami with a guy like Matt Bonner, with Diaw. I mean, it kind of goes both ways.
It does go both ways, but they're so aggressive, and their athleticism is a little down from last year, but they're still able to, you know, close off the space of Matt Bonner, close off the space of Thiago Splitter, make him, like, make bad decisions. And that's why they were successful last year. That's why Thiago Splitter, as the season went on, he was kind of just invaluable. He wasn't, I mean, not valuable in that sense.
What about you, Madalyn? What other player also gives you a little worry?
I would say Dwayne Wade, but I think Tony Parker and Danny Green have to put some aggression on him and get the job done. But I don't think, just like we have Tony Parker kind of injured, they have Dwayne Wade with the hamstring, and he's gonna step it up just like Tony Parker is gonna step it up. So he worries me.
Yeah, yeah. You know, Aaron, you know, heading into this series, you know, you and I, we've been to the Spurs, we've been to the final, we've seen it in action. You know, is it really this Spurs team? I mean, they're going to be under the bright lights once again. This is not really a big deal for them. To them, I think it's just another game.
It's that one step at a time mentality, that one foot in front of the other. They don't get ahead of themselves. There was, you know, I think with 2 years ago, there were the young role players were getting way ahead of themselves. They were looking beyond the end of the season. Last year, they were really focused. If it really wasn't for Tony Parker's hamstring, kind of slowing them down, I think that series would have been over a lot sooner.
But you know, it's funny. It's almost like we're seeing a broken record again.
Yes.
Tony Parker looks like he ran out of gas. He looked a little beat up towards the end of last season's run. Same thing this season.
Well, you have to have skill, health, and luck all just firing at the same time in order to win a championship. Doesn't matter who wins it. You can look at any team. They have to have all those things together. And the Spurs have that. I'm not so worried about Tony Parker's ankle. He's got plenty of time. I think it was smart for him to take himself out of the game. So I do think that this time around it does seem like a broken record, but I feel like the Spurs are the overwhelming favorite in this series.
Overwhelming favorite, Q.
Overwhelming favorite?
What do you think about that?
Definitely favorite. Definitely favorite. They're a lot better than they were last year, but Miami has LeBron James, and Miami has, you know, just that's almost all you need in a sense.
Before we started with this recording, you had said, like, you know what, maybe Spurs fans need to take a step back, and it ain't going to be as easy as we think it's going to be.
Yeah, the thing I'm worried about specifically is that they kind of make Boris Diaw and Thiago Splitter kind of just not effective. I mean, last year, Boris Diaw, they were -8 points per 100 possessions when he was on the floor. Thiago Splitter, non-factor, and those are two really important players in the whole series. And then they really kind of forced Tony Parker to take long angles to the hoop. They kind of made him just, you know, work harder to get his points. And then invariably, everyone else had to work harder to get their points. And anyone, I mean, I'd say if I had to pick, Oklahoma City was a tougher matchup, but Miami's damn close to them in that
Even
regard.
over Dallas. Dallas was the only team to really push us in this postseason.
I do think, though, that the Spurs have found something in their series against Oklahoma City as far as lineups. Thiago Splitter, you're right, Q, he wasn't there. But the thing is that replacing Tim Duncan into that lineup where those two are never on the floor at the same time, and always having somebody on the floor who can spread that defense, whether it be Boris Diaw or Matt Bonner. The Spurs found something that worked against Oklahoma City Thunder, Miami's defense is not as good, or they're not as matched up as well as OKC's is. So I do think you're going to see that. I think the Spurs will go with that same starting five with Matt Bonner and bring Thiago and Diaw off the bench with that second unit.
Alicia, this is a situation where the Spurs are going to just let. You're going to have to just surrender, put the white flag, and be like, you know what, LeBron, do what you got to do. Shut everybody else down.
I think it's definitely going to be a little bit of what we saw with OKC. We know we're not going to stop him, but we got to make his life difficult. There's no way that we're going to be able to stop LeBron, but we got to make him work hard, so that way he's tired after the game. He had to work hard for the 25, 26 points that he scored. So we just got to make his life difficult and make him work hard. There's no stopping him.
You know, Madalyn, this is going to be, what, the third time the Spurs are going to face a LeBron James team?
Yes.
Cleveland, and of course, last season and now this season. What is it, about this team? They look like the Spurs team as a whole have been one of the better teams when it comes to defending LeBron James.
Right. I think, like I said, Kawhi has to come in, just bring it to the paint, show that he's...
Do you remember the video from last year?
Yes.
You all remember that video where Kawhi was checking in?
Yes.
And you see LeBron James kind of looking over and going,
Right. No.
Man, like, no.
Not this guy again. He has to be that pest, and he has to just contest his shots. And I think over the past year, he's really matured as a player. We've all watched him mature, especially over this past playoffs. So I think he's ready, and I think he brings that factor into it. So I think it's going to be a whole different series this time.
All right, well, we'll see. We're hearing all the banter going back and forth about this series, and it sounds to me like we're all in agreement that maybe the San Antonio Spurs will be pulling off the win and capturing title number 5. So it's about time I put these guys on the spot. Aaron, what is your prediction? Who comes out? Who wins the series?
I was originally thinking Spurs in 6, but the more I put thought into it, I'm actually leaning towards Spurs in 5. And it's just, there's actually an age difference that people don't realize. Miami's actually, on average, 2 years older than San Antonio. Their defense is not as well matched up for the Spurs. And they're going to force Miami to live on the outside and make those tough contested shots. So Spurs in 5.
Alicia, I was going to go to you next, but I heard Q over my shoulder here kind of like scoff at Aaron's prediction. Q, take it away.
I think Spurs in 6 if Parker's healthy. It changes if he's a little, hobbled. I think it's Spurs in 7. I would go with the leaning 6 or 7 series just because LeBron, I don't see him losing in 5 games. I don't see him going like that route. And it sounds simplistic, this thing.
You think LeBron gets Miami 2 games on his own?
I think LeBron gets him 2 games on his own.
Wow.
That's LeBron. I mean, he's the best
that's
player
true,
in the world.
yeah.
There's no doubt in LeBron, but whether the rest of those guys can show up, that's my biggest question.
Well, Bosh has been showing up.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see.
Well, he was off and on in Indiana, but for the most part, he should.
Not as consistent as last season. So.
All right, Alicia?
I've been going back and forth with this one. Originally, I said Spurs in 6, but I just don't think that they can close out a Game 6 in Miami and take the championship there. So I'm going to have to go with Spurs in 7. I don't think Miami is only going to win 1 game, so I don't think it's going to close out in 5. So I'm going to have to go Spurs in 7.
Madalyn?
I agree with Alicia. Spurs in 7.
All right, why?
Because it's Miami. You can't. It's not one of the other teams.
Well, you got to factor in their experience, too. This is a team, at least they're a big 3.
And
they've been there, done that.
And they're not one of those teams that are really intimidated by a home court, by San Antonio's home court. They're champions. They're not gonna. It's not like the other teams that are kind of intimidated by our fans or being at the AT&T Center. You can't really kind of rely on that.
Well, that home court in San Antonio is pretty powerful.
It is powerful.
Ask the Thunder.
It is powerful, but this is the Heat.
Right.
So.
Right, yeah. I'm going to go with Spurs in 6. I think it all just depends on how healthy Tony Parker is. I do agree with you on that, Q. If Tony Parker comes out and plays like he did last season in the finals, we all remember how his spectacular performance goes, Spurs should win in 6. I just don't see a team with LeBron James getting swept or even a gentleman's sweep. I just can't see it.
And I'm usually one of the most objective people or pessimistic when it comes to predicting the series. I usually go to long route, but when I look at it, it screams 5 to me.
All right. Well, even if the Spurs were to win it all, let's say they win title number 5, okay? Would you like to see TD, maybe Pop, Manu go out on style and just get that mic and say, you know what? We're going to pull a David Robinson. We're going to go out on top. I personally feel that's how it should end. Their career should end. Aaron?
That's how it would be sort of kind of like a romantic gesture. But the thing is, these guys, you're going to have to drag them off the court. Right. Like Tim said a couple seasons ago, until the wheels fall off.
Right. Alicia?
Yeah, I don't see him being one of those guys. It's like, all right, I won a championship. I'm going to go out on a high note. I think he's going to play until he can't play anymore. And I think Pop's going to coach until he can't coach anymore.
Q?
Regardless of anything, I want them to stay. Selfishly, I don't want them to go. I'm not ready for this era to end. So I'm going to say he plays maybe 1-2 years max, and then we'll end it that way.
I agree. I don't think they're going to take
Yeah, you looked, of all of us, you looked more disheartened when I brought it up.
Yeah,
You're like,
the idea is heartbreaking.
No
The idea is heartbreaking, but yeah, I don't think that they're going to, if they win, I think they're going to stay.
I just want to see that. I like to see that storybook ending.
A fairy tale.
A fairy tale.
Yeah.
I would love
People
to see
close
that.
the book and then
Close the book and everything.
Let
you know.
Kawhi take over.
Let Kawhi
Yeah.
take over. Let
Boys.
Parker, finally not play in the summer and get healthy. But those are our predictions on this series. So go out and make sure to go out to ProjectSpurs.com and of course News 4 SA and Fox 29 as well. Leave your thoughts on the Spurs. All of us here and the whole Project Spurs Army, we're going to be bringing you extensive coverage of the Spurs and the Heat in the finals. So make sure to go check out all those sites for everything on the San Antonio Spurs. But for Aaron Preine, Alicia Guerrero, Quixem Ramirez, and of course Madalyn Mendoza, I am Jeff Garcia. Thanks again for watching the Spurs Roundtable. Spurs in 6.
I don't want to jinx it and say it.
Huh?
I don't want to jinx it and say
Yeah, you tend to jinx it.